Hello, everyone. Welcome back to AVX Live. I'm Joe Gilderson, President of Corporate Audio Visual Services. And once again, I am joined for maybe like the seventh or eighth week in a row by Mr. Ryan Finch.
Woo! You were almost not joined by me today. We're late.
I wasn't going to bring that up, but
I think you have to address the elephant in the room. It's 1:11. Not on brand for
all
us.
right.
Just saying.
We're a little off today, but that's okay. No big deal. We're back on target now. We're ready to roll. And Ryan's like 7 or 8 weeks in a row is a very impressive run.
I feel pretty good about it. Let's
You
make it
should.
8, 9, 10. Who knows?
Okay.
Actually, next week I definitely won't be here. So,
well, we'll talk about that later. But next week there will not be a live show, so we're gonna go on to the week after that. But we're not there yet. So listen, Ryan. Before we start talking about our great topic and very timely topic today, how about you do your part?
okay. Well, you can find us on YouTube, on Facebook, on LinkedIn Live. You can do that every Wednesday at 1:00 or maybe 1:11. Who knows, depending on how we're feeling that day.
Yeah.
1-ish. And while you're there, you can drop us a comment, be part of the show, ask some questions. We'll answer it live. And of course, while you're watching, you can also engage, like, comment, share, subscribe, all the above. Much appreciated. If you missed the show, check out YouTube for all of our previous recorded videos. And some bite-sized pieces will be up on Facebook and on Instagram for some bite-sized pieces later on. So,
wow,
there we are.
That was back. All right, we're back. We're back on track here.
CC.
We're gonna try to make up time, just like our events do. When they always start late. So listen, last week we spoke about social media. We had our latest teammate on, Alexis Van Putten, and we talked about the latest trends and how to use, social media, the advantages. We also spoke about killer robots.
I don't remember that part.
Well, I think that's one of our future challenges, so we will come back to that on a future show.
Okay, good.
However, this week's discussion is really about outdoor events. Spring and summer, of course, are our biggest months for outdoor events. After the winter, typically in the Northeast, everybody's dying to get outside. They want all their guests to be outside. Everybody wants to be out there.
True.
But that does have some things to consider. And that's what we're going to discuss today is, those things that you have to plan ahead for, because if the weather is great, man, you've got the best event ever. A little accent there for you, Finch.
Ever, with an H at the end, maybe 4, 5 H's.
There's like 4 or 5 H's there. However, if it's rainy and stormy, guess what you're going to have?
Sadness.
The worst event ever. I'm just kidding. Maybe I've been a little too dramatic, but
I think so.
There are things you just need to consider due to the elements. That's all.
Fair.
But, Ryan, have you ever done an outdoor event?
Yes. 1 or 2, maybe a lot more than that. It is the season for that. So it does kind of, pop up around these times. Of course, during the pandemic, the heat of that, there were a few others that, kind of popped up in unusual timeframes, I would say, like the middle of December. Not a great time, but I'm glad that part's over. But yeah, we've certainly worked on a number of outdoor gigs throughout the years.
Nice. I like when you call them gigs. That makes them seem more fun and interesting than they might be. But listen, before we get into the specifics of what we would recommend for audio, video, lighting, maybe we should discuss some of the key differences in an outdoor event rather than an indoor event. Things for our clients and our planner friends to just keep in mind. Maybe you kick this one off.
Key differences. I mean, are we talking about like what things go into an event? I mean,
I think
consider.
We should probably start with some of the weather concerns, would be my guess.
Okay. Well, some weather concerns, like Joe was saying, if it's raining, that would not be great unless you have something over your head. That one's pretty obvious. Tents. We're talking about tents. You do need to typically reserve those pretty early on, depending on the size, the style, there's some cost involved. Anybody who's gone through this process before knows that calling in a tent company, it's a full job. It's a fair amount of work. There's a bunch of guys setting it up. So it's some are more elaborate than others, I'd say.
Well, I think you're right. The very elaborate or very basic, depending on what you choose.
Sure.
But I think you got to have tents become a plan B that can be very necessary at times.
Yes.
You have to have covering overhead. You got to protect yourself, not just from rain, but from sun as well.
Right. Well, and I was just going to say, not just from rain. And I had a photo. Are we showing photos yet?
If you would like to show some photos, I think you should.
All right. Boom. Photo.
We're an audio visual company.
We are an audio visual company. So this setup was for a group out in Austin, Texas. Now, something you may know about Texas. Joe, what do you know about Texas?
They wear cowboy hats.
Yeah. Smart. No, well, maybe, yes, but it's also hot. And so actually the funny thing is we were less concerned about rain in this instance. We were more concerned about things starting to overheat in the sunlight. And so you can't really see, but inside that desk here, that kind of black structure that we built, there's actually a computer that has a fan built in, right? So we didn't use a laptop. We wanted to use something that actually had a significant cooling system. So the elements, to your point, Joe, are more than just liquid, of the liquid variety, sometimes physical variety. But now in this case, it was very much about managing the heat.
Yeah, it's we've actually had computers shut down due to the heat.
I think I have a photo of that too.
Yeah, we've definitely had that happen. We've had LED walls time out and go to sleep and not want to work. And
you're telling me that equipment goes to sleep sometimes?
I'm telling you that it doesn't like the heat. That's what I'm telling you.
Yes.
But either way, it's not the only thing, but certainly you have to consider where everything. There's also sometimes you need tents just to cover yourself to create a walkway.
Fair.
That's pretty common with a lot of our events too. So
absolutely,
just make sure these things are in high demand during the peak season. So you got to reserve these ahead.
Another instance, sometimes for all the cooking, catering needs to be in a separate structure aside from where all your audiences are. So again, to Joe's point, you may want to start that conversation early enough, but part of that conversation is not just about what's overhead. What about what's below? Is there a floor? Should there be a floor? Is it a day or a night event? Is it on the grass or is it on concrete, blacktop, formal, informal? Is the ground level or is it a total mess? That is a very important thing to consider. Again, not just what's overhead, but what's under your feet.
Yeah, I think the easy way to look at it is if you were at a high school graduation and it was outside, you probably don't need a floor, right? Fair. However, if Ryan sometimes likes to wear heels to some of the fundraising dinners and award dinners, his heels may get stuck in the ground.
I try to avoid that usually. So, yeah.
The floor would stop that, though.
Floor would have stopped that. Yeah. You have a nice even surface, like something like our friends at Stone Barns. No need for flooring when you have this beautiful level surface. Obviously, all the tables are set. The glasses aren't sliding off the edges.
Very nice.
People aren't wobbling in their chairs. It's nice, even surface. But if it was something, I didn't prepare this. I'm going to move on. Okay.
I don't even know what's happening.
You would need a floor. How about other elements, Joe? Not just the precipitation, but what about temperature? Now, we talked about equipment overheating, but what about people overheating or people freezing?
People don't like that.
Not great.
No. So heat, air conditioning, things you have to be aware of, obviously, depending on the time of the year, as well as the type of the event. But you need to consider these things because they will not stay if they are too hot or too cold.
That is very true. Another thing that may come with a price point attached to it. So definitely worth looking into that ahead of time. And speaking of ahead of time, another important thing to coordinate is, where are people going to use the restroom? We are human beings, not animals. There may be woods, but that's not how it's going to go. Not at your event anyway.
Not at your event.
Coordinating some sort of facility.
Those are my types of events.
Those are your types of parties, huh? Remind me not to come to one of your types of parties.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And they have some different options here, I got to say, because I don't know if you've been to like festivals or anything like that. Some of them will have like the trailer with they're like nice, they're air conditioned, right? We get back to the elements, they're lit, there's lighting in there, accommodations.
I would call that the Cadillac.
Nice. That's the cat.
Yeah.
So what you got here is the Cadillac of Porta Johns.
It's not the Jiffy John.
No, I don't know. Moving on.
The porta potty.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the easy answer, but all right. How about now we're kind of getting back into a little bit of a technical thing, but a pretty obvious one is electrical power. We got to plug some stuff in. Where are we going to plug it into? And this actually, I will pause on this for a second, because generators are obviously, something that most people would know about. But not all generators are created equal. Like, yeah, the light may turn on, but if it's flickering a little bit, that works sometimes for some things and not at all for other things, right? Like if your projection screen is blinking because it's shorting on power, or if you got a really bad buzz coming out of the speakers because of bad power. It's got dirty power. It's just dirty power. That's it. We hear that all the time. That's power.
Yeah.
But it's true. The quality of generator actually makes a pretty significant difference. So when it comes to things that we're powering our equipment up on, we're tending to stick with things that are tried and true. We go to some friends like United Tool and a few others that we'll pick up from for these types of events, and again, things that we're relying on to make your event a success. It's not just charging people's iPhones.
No, and it's not just us.
Right.
You need that electricity for cooking. You need it for many other things. It's just there is no infrastructure usually. And if it was a patio, let's say at a country club or something like that, they usually don't have enough to do a full production. So it's just power is going to be something you think about, just like restrooms, floors, and ceilings. Right. You have to think about it.
How about how people get to the event, Joe?
I mean, could they take a scooter?
They could take a scooter, depending on if there are scooters available. I actually really like the electric scooters. Those are a lot of fun. You got to be in the right area for it. But regardless, whatever wheels you're rolling in on, you're going to need a place to leave that thing. Or maybe you have shuttle buses bringing people, to and fro at a different location. But parking is something to consider, especially if you're in like a field. Mud doesn't play nice with lots of cars. And I have personally seen some nightmare situations where, people come time to leave and people aren't leaving. They're staying. And that is a really bad time for everyone.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've had that happen many times. Usually there's some rain involved and some mud, but we're going to try not to remember all of those things. But, many times at our events, I know that the staff always has to park really far away too. So maybe those are things you got to consider. Where are the vendors going to park their trucks? Where is staff who are working the event? Where are they going to park? Is there a shuttle? Is it just a long walk? Does that have to be factored in? And can they actually leave? Sometimes places close. There are gates and things that have to be worked out ahead of time. Just make sure you have all the logistical information.
Absolutely. And then one last little thing that we'll include in here, especially in this new world of hybrid events, is internet connectivity. That is one thing I would say most people overlook today in today's world of outdoor events is internet connection. You're just so used to being able to pick up your phone and I'm sorry, wait, where's my phone? Hello? No. You're so used to being able to pick up your phone and just hit the internet right away, right from here, and not even think twice about it. But when it comes to an actual hybrid production where things have to work, it can't depend on where I am in that field. It's got to work. that is where we need to bring in some sort of infrastructure. And unfortunately, the options are limited, and there is a price point with it. So ideally, we're pulling internet from somewhere that is a little bit more established, maybe a building nearby, and we're running a long line. That is something we, had a set up in a tent a few 100 feet away from a building, and we said, well, that's where the internet's coming from, because that's going to be our best bet, and it worked out quite nicely. But then there are times where you have no other option, and so the most basic scenario is like a mobile hotspot. But even then, you're subject to how Verizon's doing in this particular spot in this particular field, and you're all in on that at that point. And then, of course, there are some other things that we could bring in, bonded cellular units where, maybe we group together Sprint, T-Mobile, and Verizon and create a nice little custom pipeline for ourselves and do something like that. A little rudimentary in an explanation, but another direction that we could go. So definitely something to think about ahead of time. It is not, Wi-Fi is not available in most parks, so worth exploring. Joe, what's this?
That is a giant tent in a parking lot outside of a corporate building that we did have to run a hard line about 1,000 feet to get there.
1,000 feet? That's a lot of feet.
So that we could then show 104,000 people watching a live stream at the same time. But I mean, who's counting?
I mean, sounded like you were, but
I was, yes, clearly, because I was like, wow, that's a lot of people.
It is a lot of people.
We need this line to work. Hopefully this thing stays, And of course, we did have to run 2 because it seemed important.
It does seem important. Backups on backups.
I have a feeling we might come to this picture a little later on as part of another area of our discussion.
Wow, that was cryptic.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so I think we gave people some quick tips about how outdoor events are different. Maybe now we'll get into kind of what our recommendations would be on some of the core items. But I will let you take over from here. I'm merely just here to support you.
Okay.
I'm here to serve. I mean,
fair. Well, I guess I'll tee this guy up then. Just a quick point of reference for all you watching out there. Most of these outdoor events are graduations, they're fundraisers, award dinners, company outings, musical performances, and similar events. So we're going to focus on that as our point of reference, and not on, say, outdoor concerts, festivals. I know I did just mention a festival, sporting events, amusement parks, things like that. We're going to stick more to the core of the work that most of you all see us working on, and less so those kind of public, all-encompassing types of things. So, Joe, why don't you start? I'm going to kick it back to you. Why don't you start off on audio?
Oh, audio. Do we do that? Oh, yeah.
We do.
All right, we'll start with outdoor audio. This is the one thing we almost always need, so that's really critical. The biggest question is really how much ground we're covering, because as you get outside, I mean, yes, sound carries, but it may not be exactly how you want it to carry. So you need to identify what kind of area that we're going to cover. And then in our case, we typically then plot out what sound system is going to be the most effective for that situation. In general, this is where we would use our line arrays, which are bigger sound systems. Many times we have them high in the air, and they're, they might be 18 feet in the air, and it's called flying, and they're reaching larger audiences that way. But sometimes we build them from the ground up. There also might be different spaces that we have to cover, whether it's vendor areas or sponsor areas or side stages. Or maybe, Ryan, I might actually have a graphic here.
I was hoping you would.
We were at the finish line? Wouldn't you want people to be excited and here at the finish line?
I think we would.
Well, that finish line might be really far away from where everything else is. And so a lot of times there's like a second sound system. So these are just things you need to know what kind of area you're covering, and then we'll know the best tools to use to accomplish the goal.
Of course, in some cases, right, the beginning is the end and the end is the beginning, right?
You just blew my mind.
Loop. A big loop is an easy way to centralize things. I know, I'm pretty smart.
Blew my mind.
All right. Well, let's move on. Really great points. Well done. Golf clap.
Thank you.
Let's move into video. Now, I know that's something we've covered somewhat recently, but I think it's worth kind of going over once more. The I say key starting point is projection is usually not part of this conversation, right? If we're in a tent that has a lot of, say, cover, opaque walls, there's no light bleeding through, full overhead, okay, maybe, right? We still need a lot of space, but maybe. But more
Wait a
often
minute.
than
Why?
not,
You're saying we can't do projection in a tent?
well, nighttime also helps.
Oh,
I didn't get to that. You cut me off.
I know.
Well, at least you had visuals. So I got to give you that.
That was intentional.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it worked out. So yeah, projection is typically not in the conversation, especially specifically while the sun is up. So the sun always wins is the easiest thing to say. I know it's kind of a little. It makes sense when you think about it, but you may not think about it, and that is even residual light coming in under a canopy or a pavilion. Even like that residual sunlight is enough to really drown things out. Now your eyes adjust, but the projector is about as strong as it is, and that's it. Now, the other issue when it comes to outdoor screens is that they are awful lot like sails, and a little bit of wind will blow those things over unless they're weighted properly. And the kinds of screens that are weighted properly tend to be inflatable, of the inflatable variety.
It was the
And
wind.
that was really good, by the way. I wish we had.
Thank
I got to load up some sound effects in this guy. We definitely could make it work. Anywho, moving on. That being said, the most common solutions for outdoor events are there we go. Outdoor screens, LED. We do have a few quick examples of some.
Yeah, I know that guy.
You do know that guy. Of some mobile LED trucks, and very quick. They drive right in. We set them up, and they work really well. They're nice and bright. They don't, they're not drowned out by the sun easily. So they are super functional and a go-to tool for outdoor events. Excuse me. Of course, aside from that, we do use a lot of. Oh, look at that! There we go. More
Nice.
LED, and so same room. Hold on, same room. Daytime LED, full circle moment. Booyah!
So you mean we started here because that was at night? Oh,
and we ended here. Wow,
nice. That was.
It's almost
cool.
like we planned this, which we didn't.
Nope.
Anyway, TV monitors. I got a few examples of those, but you know what they look like. They stand on the ground. You can put them basically anywhere. Obviously, we need a level surface or they fall over, and that's not great. Or if they're not weighted properly, I wish I had a photo. I
don't like those.
If they're not weighted properly, they fall down and they break. So definitely needs to be weighted properly.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Anyway, but again, level surface, very versatile, bright enough to compete with the sunlight. Fortunately, the screens are less of a risk of overheating as opposed to, say, LED versus TV monitors. But again, very simple TV screens. Another thing I wanted to call attention to: outdoor tech positions. We talked about this earlier, right? Overhead is not just for the elements, but also for the sunlight. I wish I was trying to find that picture of Bobby, or it was Bobby or John.
I know what you're talking about.
He had the duvetine over his head so that you couldn't even see him. He looked like he was hiding underneath stuff, but it was because the sun was so strong and there was nothing over his head. And so anyway,
you can't actually see what you're looking at.
Yes. It also is hot.
Yeah. It's blanked out. And so you can't see. And then you may not actually know what your next cue is.
Which is not ideal.
No. All right. So let's take from video. Let's go into talk about lighting a little bit. Now, outside during the day, we rarely use any lighting. You can't see it. It just doesn't show up enough where we're going to recommend it to a lot of our clients. However, at night, I mean, lighting's the big show, right? It's that's where a lot of things happen. So we set up a lot of bistro lights or string lights. I do have an image there for that one. And that could be, this particular situation was out on a tennis court. And so we set those types of lights up so they would have dinner lighting. Otherwise, it is literally pitch black out there. You can't see anything. So that's a pretty important thing. Obviously, we're going to accent different things, and we're going to highlight other moments outside, trees and architecture, and then we're going to add color, during the dinners. That is kind of what we had this picture for here, was to show, okay, at night everything's a little different, but lighting becomes the big show. Um, but there are a few areas that I think people forget about, and that becomes functional areas and safety. So kitchens, especially in a tent, restroom areas. When there's an outdoor, even that Cadillac trailer that Ryan was talking about, there's usually a walkway in a parking lot to get to it. So you need to light it so people can find their way there. Walkways, stairwells, parking areas, all those things generally may or may not be lit for a nighttime event because they weren't really designed to do that. And it can get pretty dark, and that is what I wanted to come back to this picture for.
Nice callback.
This was during the day, bright and sunny outside, but something that people forget, that sometimes tents are very dark. You can see there's still walls on the side where light's coming in, and there are overhead lights. We have an event next week. We're talking about this. There are no overhead lights. It is at night. And so now we're changing up our lighting design to accommodate just the overhead ambient lighting as people are eating. But lighting becomes really a very important element at night, not during the day.
Fair.
Thank you.
I do have some additional examples if you wanted to hear from the peanut gallery.
It depends on what the examples look like.
Well, you're about to find out, and I'm about to find out too, because I don't remember. Boom. Okay.
Super.
Bar lighting. Now, again, this makes a lot more of an impact at night, but fortunately, it was pretty dark underneath this canopy. So, certainly something to consider is calling attention, especially when there's things in different places. Calling attention to where things are. A little bit back to the functional lighting, but in this case, a little bit more decor. I also wanted to add one other example of outdoor lighting when it's still daytime. It does still help a little bit when it comes to camera images. So I'm sorry to interject with that, Joe, but
no, you're 100% right. 100%.
I feel pretty good about that. That's great. Moving right along. Look how nice that looks. More bistro lighting. How about structural lighting?
Ooh, architectural. Look at that.
Architectural. Yes.
Wow.
Yep. And then a little bit more functional. Hey, walk this way.
Look how nice that looks.
How about that? You missed a very low-hanging fruit on this one.
I mean, I am the one who lit it up. I mean, it looks nice.
Well, I mean, you had help, but
yeah, you don't know that.
That's true. Well, I got a better shot of it. There we go. How about entryway lighting into whatever structure you're going to?
Ooh.
And then, of course, be careful where you put your uplights because trucks drive there.
No, Ryan. We don't want broken shots.
I know, but sometimes it happens. Another thing I wanted to just point out, which is totally unrelated to lighting, is making sure that everything actually fits underneath the tent and things don't spill out. And including, not limited to, cable trunks. And in this case, this is pretty awesome, by the way. So just to explain what this is a connection of Ethernet points. So we had a very, very long internet run, and we knew it was going to be outside, and there was a chance it was going to rain, and it absolutely did. And it's the connection points that really need the cover. And so in this case, this was recommended to us by our very own Ed Willick. He said, let's get some plastic containers, and you basically cut a hole in each side, feed the cable through, put the connection point in between, tape it off, and you are good. And absolutely we were. So I just wanted to make sure that was covered, because I thought that was actually kind of an interesting tip. So anytime you're connecting things outside, the connection points are the things you need to pay particular attention to. No smashing lights on the subscribe button. I don't know what that means, but I kind of. Oh wait, I man no smash. Just smash the subscribe button. I man no smashing lights. I know what you mean. Well put, Mike. No smashing lights. Lights. Just smash the subscribe button. We're off the rails. That's it. That's all I got. We're done. You're on mute.
That's rogue photos, man. That's what happens. We're off the rails. All right. So listen, besides your rogue photos here, I mean, I might be skipping one area. I might be skipping one area. What about staging?
So I was hoping that while I was presenting photos of lighting, you'd realize that I misinterpreted which ones I was supposed to cover. But fortunately, while you were talking, I actually pulled together something.
I'm glad you got something together.
I got something. When it comes to outdoor staging, the surface, right? What kind of surface we use tends to change because we don't want something carpeted. Because carpet gets wet and muddy and then can't use it again. So we're looking for something that is easily cleanable. We can rinse it off, no problem. So like a hard rubber top tends to be the better solution. It's also harder to slip on, especially if you're coming from wet grass. So the surface of the stage is important. But what is especially important is to consider what's underneath. Because this is where, when it comes to level surface, level ground, things become really, really important because, as I will show in such examples like this that we saw earlier, what you can't really see is that this stage is actually 2 tiers. And I'm actually going to show kind of what I mean here. So here's a quick overhead view of that stage. I think the back piece kind of went away, so it was just the front piece. But you can kind of see there's 2 separate sections of stage. There's steps, and the stage pieces are on different levels. And just to kind of illustrate what that looked like, here you go. And the idea is we wanted the band to be on a lower level, whereas the actual reading of the names at this particular graduation was up at the top level. So the reason I'm showing this example is we have things that are kind of working together in different heights. And so what becomes really, really difficult to manage is uneven ground. And so we needed to put what we call shims, so wood pieces of plywood down. And that was to provide kind of a level surface of the feet of the stage that came down and sat really on the turf. And so it doesn't sink into the ground, because you don't want that. Then your stage starts to literally disappear, and also gets disgusting. But the other reason is to help create a level surface so that things can kind of get situated, because again, you're standing on top of a stage. It'd be very easy to trip if things didn't line up correctly. And so I guess the biggest takeaway, the biggest tip here is make sure you leave yourself extra time to build outdoor stages, because you're going to need extra time. It takes probably like twice as long to build it outside as it does inside, really just because of that surface issue. So there you go. See that? I came up with something.
That's pretty good. And just a little thing to add on to that is just the height. Sometimes the height is a factor. There's different regulations in different states. So once you start getting to over 2 feet high, then a lot of times you have to come up with some other solutions with railings in the back, railings on the sides. You have to consider if you're going to need a ramp. You're going to need a ramp. There's regulations that go with that as well. So you need to kind of think it all through. Again, just like Ryan said, time is always the key to everything with these, and really the planning. You can't, for an outdoor event, I think it's critical to have a lot of discussion, do the site visits, come up with layouts of how you're going to place things outside, and you just got to think it through, and then you'll flush out all these details and you'll get it right. But certainly consider the help from all of your suppliers and key consultants, the event consultants. Yes, you like that one, all right?
That was good, right? No.
I don't know what you're doing there.
I don't know what I was doing either. I was trying to make it seem like us,
Oh, all right. That
seemed
was
like a work at the time.
It seemed like a Vogue moment.
It was like a Vogue moment, but then I realized I'm literally in a frame right now, so it's kind of redundant. It's a frame within a frame.
There you go. You're a frame within a frame. Yeah. Okay.
Hey,
so
this is actually a good question. Do different towns have different issues when it comes to what they allow outside? I have no idea. Find out next time.
Yes. There's going to be permits. There's going to be things that you have to arrange. Everybody is very different.
Different municipalities, absolutely.
Certainly Times Square Alliance will have very particular rules. Each town, a lot of towns put on street fairs, and so they got to get things worked out. There's got to be police and fire around. There has to be ambulances. There's a lot of permits. There's sound ordinances. You just got to know what's going on. I mean, we for years have done a walk over in one of the big parks in Brooklyn, and our event started at 9 a.m. We would get there at 5 a.m. We couldn't actually hear anything until like 8:45.
Right.
Because that's what the rules were for the park.
Right.
But you just need to get all the information. So that's a good question, Mike. And, Ryan, I did see a question come up earlier too. Maybe our first question.
Rain dates. This is actually a very good question. So here's the challenge, I will say, with rain dates for us. Many times they want it to be the very next day. And what that means to us is we have to be prepared to do the event on both days. We need the equipment ready and available. We need to pull it out of our inventory, obviously. We need the staff reserved and ready to go, which in some cases, does mean that you're doubling certain costs. Maybe not all of them. We try to help as best we can. But when the rain date is the very next day, we got to be ready to roll on whatever day that may be, unless of course we get enough lead time, right? Like if we're going to find out, say a week out, okay, we can make arrangements, we can make some adjustments. But if it's like a game time decision type of thing, then we really need to be ready to roll both times. Now, in some cases, it'll be a rain date that is, say, 2-3 weeks out. Different story. I'd say we kind of handle those case by case and see what works best for everybody.
Yeah, those are all the things that you have to come up with in your planning and think that through. And many events are rain or shine just because it's logistically too complex. But that depends on each client, each event, and the particular details associated with it. But it's an excellent question.
We have one more question from the audience here. LinkedIn user. I actually know LinkedIn user.
Oh, I know you.
It's good to see you again. Thanks for joining us. Is there anything you can utilize outdoors to contain the sound you emit? That's a really good question. My first thought is the more speakers you have, the better coverage you have, the lower the volume can be, right? As you're doing more point source, as they call it, as opposed to those big line arrays up front that they pack a punch. And, if I got to turn up the volume loud enough to cover an entire field from 2 speakers, well, that sound travels. But if I have, a big wide open space and a lot more speakers spread out around, then I can collectively turn the volume down on each of them and cover the ground without actually really, driving the sound. Joe, do you have any comments on that? Okay. Well,
there you go.
That's my 2 cents. That seems right to me. If somebody asked me that, I would say that very confidently on the phone, and then I would go talk to Gabe or someone from our audio team and find out a little bit more. Why don't I do that? I will actually LinkedIn user. I'm also going to check with one of our lead audio engineers to see what he thinks, and I'll post that in the comments. So check back in a little bit, and we'll get you a more thought out answer. But I still kind of feel pretty good about mine.
It was very interactive.
It was energetic. I at least have that much.
Very passionate.
Woo!
Yeah. Okay. It's time to wrap this thing up.
Good points. Thanks, LinkedIn user. Appreciate it.
Hey, they capitalized on the point source. That was nice.
I liked it. Yeah.
That was good. Very cool.
All right. Well, that's it. Bye.
Time to wrap it up, Finch. Okay. Let's do your thing, man.
You can find us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube Live. You can do it every Wednesday at 1:00. While you're there, drop us a comment. Be part of the show. And of course, you can like, share, subscribe, comment. I did it backwards. All the above. Super helpful. Much appreciated. If you missed this show, go check out our full video library discography on YouTube, and you can also find some bite-sized pieces on Facebook and on Instagram after the show.
So good. So good. You just blew me away, man. Blew me away.
Pretty good about it. Also, I don't know if you noticed, I fixed the color of my face, the camera, halfway through the show because we were late, so I didn't get to do that.
Spectacular.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And next week, we are not going to be here on next Wednesday, but we'll be back on the 26th, I think. 26th, we'll be back. So thank you, everyone. Have a great week. And bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.
I'm not saying anything.